Before we end this first verbal session, let's talk a little about the test, how it's scored, and some important ideas about handling the GMAT. Let's start by talking about how the GMAT is scored. Small increases, 10, 20, 30, or 40 points, can jump you ahead of more than 10% of the competition, thousands and thousands of other test takers. Now, I know that you all have a goal that you want to hit, but it's important to know that as you work towards that goal, just how much progress you're making. When evaluating your GMAT performance, consider two things: scaled score and percentile, which essentially go hand in hand. The scaled score ranges from 200 to 800, and very few people score an 800, less than 100 test takers every year across the world. The 50 percentile means you're right in the middle. You did better than 50% of GMAT test takers, and your score would be a 550. The 80th percentile means you're in the top 20%. You did better than 80% of GMAT test takers, and your score would be a 650. And if you're in the 90th percentile, that means you're in the top 10%. You did better than 90% of GMAT test takers, and your score would be about a 700. The 700 is particularly significant because top 10 business schools tend to have students who average a 700 or better on the GMAT. Now, as you're studying, don't get completely consumed by the verbal and quant sections. Your score report will have a total of 3 scores. Let's quickly review what those are. As we said before, you have your GMAT total score based on your performance in the verbal and quant sections, and it goes from 200 to 800 in 10-point increments. You also have a separate score for the analytical writing section. Your essay will be scored on a 0 to 6 scale, and you can get a score in half-point increments. So you could get a score of 6, or 5.5, or 3, or 4.5, etc. And you have a separate score for the integrated reasoning section, which is scored on a 1 to 8 scale in 1-point increments. You'll receive an unofficial score report at the test center once you're done with the exam, and an official score report up to 20 days later. During this session, I mentioned how important it is to be efficient and to find the fastest way to get to the right answer. Well, you already know one reason. It's a timed test. But also consider this. For both the verbal and the quant sections, the first question you see will be of medium difficulty. About half of GMAT test takers will get it right, and about half would get it wrong. And after a few of these questions, the computer algorithm will adjust to give you questions that are more difficult if you got those first few correct. If you didn't, you'll see some slightly easier questions. This is what we mean by a computer adaptive test. So, for pacing yourself, stick to the timing guidelines suggested earlier. And for question types that you feel more comfortable with, you'll want to spend even less time so that you can bank time for the more difficult problems.